Hello there and welcome. This session is designed to help you ease into deep, restful sleep. We'll begin with a simple meditation to calm your body and quiet your mind. Then, as you drift closer to sleep, I'll introduce a gentle bedtime story, just enough to carry you into your dreams. Before we begin, press the like button and subscribe for more sleep story videos. I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment saying where you're listening from and what time. Find a comfortable position, close your eyes, and take a deep breath in and out. Take a slow, deep breath in and exhale gently. One more time, inhale deeply, filling your lungs with fresh, soothing air. And as you exhale, let go of the day, releasing any tension, any thoughts that no longer serve you. With each breath, feel your body becoming lighter, more at ease, sinking into comfort. You're doing great. Next, bring your awareness to the top of your head. Imagine a warm, gentle light resting there, like the soft glow of a bedside lamp. This light begins to spread slowly, easing away any tension in your forehead, softening the space between your eyebrows, relaxing your eyelids, your cheeks, your jaw. There's nothing you need to hold on to. Just let everything soften, loosen, unwind. Feel your shoulders drop slightly as if a weight has been lifted. Your arms become heavy, sinking into deep relaxation. With every breath, this warmth moves lower, your chest rising and falling effortlessly, your stomach soft and calm, your legs and feet completely at rest. The world around you fades into quiet. There is nothing to do, nowhere to be. Just this moment, just rest. Imagine yourself wrapped in a cozy, soft blanket of stillness, safe, warm, and peaceful. Each breath carries you deeper into comfort, deeper into rest, deeper into sleep. And here's tonight's cozy bedtime story. The air in Willowbrook smelled like damp earth and wood smoke, just like it always had. As I stepped out of my rental car, a heavy ache settled in my chest. I hadn't been back here in years, not since my last obligatory Christmas visit to Gran. Now I was here for her funeral, and the thought of sorting through her things, closing up the house and leaving this town behind once and for all was both a relief and a burden. The service was small, just as she would have wanted. Gran had never been one for fanfare. She would have called it nonsense and gone right back to her knitting, and apparently so had everyone else in town. As I stood by the grave, shivering in my too-thin coat, people offered their condolences, their words blending together into a dull hum. It wasn't until later, when the attorney handed me a manila envelope in his office, that my plans for a quick exit crumbled. "She left you something," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Besides the house, of course." I skimmed the papers, expecting bank accounts or debts, something normal. But my eyes caught on one line that made my stomach sink. "She left me the knitting group?" I asked, sure I had misread it. The attorney nodded. The Willowbrook Knitting Circle meets every Wednesday at the local cafe. It was very important to her. I let out a disbelieving laugh. That's ridiculous. I don't knit. Nevertheless, she wanted you to take over. He slid a folder toward me. She made it clear in her will. The very next day, I stood outside the Warm Hearth Cafe, staring at the hand-painted sign as though it might suddenly offer me an escape route. The cafe smelled of coffee and cinnamon, but I barely noticed as I stepped inside, scanning the room for a group of women who likely already hated me. I found them in the back, 4 elderly women and 1 man, all surrounded by heaps of yarn and knitting needles clicking in rhythmic harmony. When I hesitated at the edge of the table, a woman with a pinched mouth and sharp eyes glanced up. "You're late," she said. "Edith, be nice," another woman chided gently. This one had soft features, warm brown eyes, and a sweater that looked handmade. "Claire, it's good to see you again." I searched my memory. "Maggie?" She nodded with a small smile. "Sit, dear." I sat stiffly, my hands resting in my lap. The only man in the group, a burly, bearded fellow who looked like he belonged in a lumberjack competition, grinned at me. "Well, well," he drawled. "Gran's little city girl returns. Jonah," I frowned. "You were always hanging around Gran's house, weren't you?" "That's because your Gran was a saint," he said. "And she made the best peach cobbler." I swallowed past the lump in my throat. "Yeah, she did." "So." Edith folded her hands in her lap, studying me like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. "Do you knit?" "No," I admitted. "Then why are you here?" I hesitated. Gran left me the group. A scoff. "And what are you supposed to do with it? You can't even knit a basic stitch." Heat rose in my face. I wasn't sure why I cared what Edith thought, but her words stung. I turned to Maggie, hoping for some support. "You could learn," Maggie said gently. "We could teach you." Edith snorted. "No point. She'll be gone before she even figures out how to cast on." I opened my mouth, ready to argue, but Jonah chuckled. "Don't mind Edith. She's just mad because she lost the town bake-off 3 years in a row." Edith glared. "Watch yourself, Jonah." Something about their bickering eased the tension in my chest. For the first time since arriving, I felt something close to comfort. Until Maggie handed me a pair of knitting needles. "Here, dear, try a simple knit stitch." I stared at the needles like they were foreign objects. I don't even know where to start." Maggie guided my hands, but my fingers fumbled, the yarn slipping and tangling. After several failed attempts, I exhaled sharply. "This is impossible." Jonah smirked. "It's not impossible, just takes practice." Frustration boiled in my gut. I wasn't cut out for this. I wasn't Gran. I had no business running a knitting group when I could barely tie my shoes without tripping. Maybe Edith was right. Maybe I should just leave. But then Maggie reached into a worn knitting bag, the one that had sat beside Gran's armchair for as long as I could remember. She pulled out a half-finished project, soft blue yarn wound neatly around the needles. And tucked inside the bag was a note, written in Gran's familiar looping script. "Finish what I started." My breath caught in my throat. I ran my fingers over the fabric, the stitches uneven in places, but unmistakably hers. Gran had been working on this before she passed, and she had wanted me to finish it. I swallowed hard. Maybe she knew I'd struggle. Maybe she knew I'd want to quit. But she also knew me better than anyone. She knew I needed something to hold on to. I looked up at the expectant faces around the table. Edith still looked doubtful, but Maggie's expression was full of encouragement. Even Jonah had stopped smirking, watching me with something that might have been curiosity. I squared my shoulders and picked up the needles again. "Okay," I said quietly. "Show me one more time." Maggie beamed, and even Edith muttered something that sounded suspiciously like approval. As I clumsily worked my way through the first few stitches, I realized something. I might not belong in Willowbrook. I might not be a knitter. But for now, for Gran, I would try. I arrived at the next knitting meeting with a mixture of determination and uncertainty swirling inside me. Gran would have wanted me to be here, I reminded myself. She had always said this group was more than just a club, it was a community. And after last week's meeting, I was beginning to understand what she meant. As soon as I stepped into the cozy room at the community center, Edith was already in full instructor mode. She wasted no time handing me a pair of needles and a skein of soft blue yarn, her sharp eyes scanning me like a drill sergeant assessing a new recruit. "Right, Claire. Time to get serious," she declared, tugging her cardigan sleeves up her arms. "You're going to learn the basics today, whether you like it or not." I bit back a laugh at her no-nonsense tone. "I'm ready," I said, settling into a seat. For the next hour, Edith took me through the intricacies of casting on, the rhythm of the knit stitch and the dreaded purl, which seemed to have a personal vendetta against me. My fingers fumbled, the yarn split, and my stitches tightened so much that my swatch was as stiff as cardboard. But Edith was relentless, her guidance firm but patient. Meanwhile, the rest of the group continued their own projects. Maggie, sitting across from me, let out a heavy sigh and set down her half-finished scarf. "Everything okay?" I asked, relieved for a momentary break from my battle with the needles. Maggie gave me a wry smile, but her eyes held a sadness that she couldn't quite conceal. "Not really," she admitted. "The divorce is harder than I thought. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but some days I don't even recognize myself." A soft murmur of support spread through the group. Edith reached over, squeezing Maggie's hand. "One stitch at a time, love. That's how we get through things." Jonah, who was knitting what looked like a very lumpy hat, nodded. "I get it. It's been 6 months since my wife passed, and I still feel like I'm playing catch-up every single day. Being a single parent is like trying to knit with spaghetti, messy and completely unpredictable." The group chuckled, but there was warmth behind it. I could see the way their words lifted Maggie just a little, as if the weight she carried had lightened, even if only for a moment. Just then, Emily, the youngest member of our group, let out a yelp. Somehow, she had managed to entangle herself in a giant heap of multicolored yarn. Her arms were caught, her legs wrapped in strands of red and green, and she looked like a very determined Christmas present that had tried to unwrap itself. The sight sent a ripple of laughter through the room. Edith rushed to untangle her, muttering about the importance of organization, while Emily giggled, clearly unfazed. As I watched, something inside me shifted. This wasn't just a knitting group. It was a safety net, a place where burdens were shared, where laughter softened life's hardest blows. Then the door opened, and Tess rushed in, looking flustered and out of breath. Her auburn hair was wind-blown, and her usually neat sweater was askew. She offered a quick, distracted smile as she settled into a chair. "You okay?" I asked softly. She waved a hand. "Oh, just running late, nothing to worry about." But I saw the way her fingers trembled as she picked up her needles, the way her jaw tightened as she avoided my gaze. Something was definitely wrong. I didn't press her, not yet. Instead, I returned to my misshapen swatch, the repetitive movement grounding me. The meeting continued, filled with gentle conversation, tangled yarn, and imperfect stitches. And as I sat among them, I realized something else Gran had always known. Knitting wasn't just about creating something with our hands. It was about holding each other together, stitch by stitch. I never thought knitting would change my life. It started as a whim, a suggestion from a well-meaning coworker who thought I could use a hobby. "It'll be therapeutic," she had said. Therapeutic was the last thing it felt like as I sat in the dimly lit back room of Maggie's bookstore, tangled in a mass of yarn that was supposed to be a scarf. The others were patient with me, especially Maggie, who had been running this group for years. She would lean over, untwist my stitches, and offer gentle guidance while managing her own intricate projects. I envied the way her hands moved, fluid and sure, like knitting was second nature. Maggie had struggles of her own. Her ex-husband was making things difficult again. Something about revising the custody agreement for their son. She never went into much detail, but I saw the stress in the way she clenched her jaw whenever her phone buzzed. Jonah, the quiet man who usually sat across from me, had recently started coming back to the group. He had lost his wife a few years ago and, from what Maggie told me, had only just begun to step back into the world of the living. I often caught him hesitating before speaking, as if measuring each word carefully. He wasn't ready to date again, though Maggie and Tess liked to tease him about the woman from the bakery who always gave him extra cookies. And then there was Tess. Bright, boisterous, and always ready with a story, Tess could make anyone laugh. But I noticed the small signs, the way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was looking, the way she sometimes stared at her phone with a sadness she tried to mask. Something was wrong, but she hadn't shared it yet. Somehow, amidst these strangers-turned-friends, I found a sense of belonging. But then I made the sweater. It was supposed to be a gift for Emily, my niece. I had spent weeks carefully selecting the softest yarn, painstakingly following each step of the pattern. And then, in one careless moment, I shrank it. I had stared at the tiny, misshapen thing in horror. It wasn't just a ruined sweater. It was proof that I didn't belong here, that I wasn't good enough. I had almost quit that night, ready to pack up my needles and never return. But when I showed up at the next meeting, I found the group waiting for me, smiles on their faces, holding something in their hands, a new sweater, my pattern, my colors, but their work. Maggie had redone the stitches with the precision I lacked. Jonah had fixed the seams, and Tess had added a delicate trim that I never would have thought of. "We all make mistakes, Claire," Maggie said gently as she placed the sweater in my hands. "That's why we have each other." Tears blurred my vision as I ran my fingers over the fabric. It was more than a gift. It was proof that I belonged. From that moment on, the knitting circle wasn't just a hobby. It was my family. I ran my fingers over the cover of the notebook, tracing the delicate floral print worn smooth from years of use. Gran's handwriting, bold and unmistakable, was scrawled across the first page. "For my girls." The words sent a shiver through me. It wasn't just knitting patterns tucked between these pages. It was a piece of her, a reminder of what we had all lost. I hesitated before flipping through, but curiosity pulled me in. The pages were filled with her neat script, instructions for scarves, mittens, baby blankets, and then wedged between the pages, the letters. Each one folded carefully, each one addressed in that same familiar handwriting. My heart pounded. One for me, one for Tess, one for the others. I should give them out, I knew that. But I was afraid. These letters could reopen wounds we'd only just begun to heal. They could change everything. The kitchen table felt too small under the weight of my thoughts, so I stood abruptly, clutching the notebook to my chest. Maybe I wasn't ready yet. Maybe I never would be. Just as I turned toward the stairs, Tess's voice rang out. "Claire, wait." I turned to see her standing in the doorway, hands knotted together. "What's wrong?" I asked, slipping the notebook onto the counter, forcing my fingers to unclench. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "But I don't know how." She hesitated, her breath unsteady, and then, "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between us. My brain stalled, then restarted at an unsteady pace. "Pregnant?" I repeated, as if saying it aloud would make it real. Tess nodded, biting her lip. "I don't know what to do. My parents, they're going to freak out." I took a step closer, reaching for her hand. "You don't have to do this alone." Tess let out a shaky breath, relief flickering in her eyes. I don't even know where to start." I thought of the letters, of Gran's unwavering support, of the way she had always known exactly what to say. Maybe we weren't ready to open them yet, but we could still hold each other up. "We'll figure it out," I promised. "Together." Tess exhaled, nodding. "Together." The rest of the group arrived that evening, filling the house with the familiar hum of laughter and voices. I watched them, my heart tight with the knowledge that I was keeping something from them. But tonight wasn't about me. It was about Tess. "I have something to tell you all," she said, gripping the edge of her chair. She looked at me and I gave her a small nod. She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." A beat of silence, then an explosion of voices. "Oh my God, Tess, are you serious?" "Holy..." The words blended together, but the love in the room was unmistakable. It wrapped around her, lifted her up. The fear in her eyes softened, replaced by something warmer. "We've got you," Ava said firmly, reaching across the table to squeeze Tess's hand. Yeah, no matter what, Sam added. You're not alone. Tess swallowed hard, nodding. Thank you. Later that night, after the others had drifted home, I sat alone in the kitchen, the notebook in front of me. I ran my fingers over the letters again, my own name staring back at me. I unfolded the paper with shaky hands. My dearest Claire, you've always been running, haven't you? Even when you stood still, your heart was somewhere else. I need you to stop, sweetheart. Stop running, stop hiding. Life is waiting for you. Not in the past, not in the future, but right here. It's time to embrace the life you truly want. With love, always, Gran. Tears blurred the words, and I pressed the letter to my chest. Maybe it was time. Maybe I was ready to stop running, too. The scent of warm pastries and freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the soft hum of conversation and the rhythmic click of knitting needles. I glanced around the cozy cafe, my heart swelling at the sight of so many familiar faces, each one gathered here to honor Gran. Tonight wasn't just about knitting. It was about community, about the warmth of shared memories, and the quiet strength of moving forward together. Maggie bustled behind the counter, her cheeks flushed with excitement as she balanced a tray of cupcakes in one hand and a steaming pot of tea in the other. "Specialty batch for tonight," she announced, setting down the tray. "Lavender honey, just like Gran used to make." A murmur of appreciation rippled through the room. I reached for one of the delicate pastries, the taste immediately transporting me back to Gran's kitchen. "She'd be so proud of you, Mags," I said softly, catching her eye. Maggie beamed. "I think she'd like knowing her recipes are still bringing people together." Tess sat beside me, her belly beginning to show beneath her soft cardigan. She rested a hand over it as she concentrated on the stitches in her latest project, a tiny pair of booties. "I still can't believe I'm doing this," she admitted with a small laugh. "Knitting and everything else. But I think Gran knew I needed this." "You're going to be an amazing mom," I assured her. "And that baby is going to be the best-dressed little one in town." Jonah chuckled from his seat across from me. "If your scarves are anything to go by, Claire, I think you might give her some competition." I rolled my eyes, but couldn't help smiling. My scarf, the very first one I'd ever completed, was wrapped snugly around my shoulders. The stitches weren't perfect, the rows slightly uneven, but it was mine. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was just filling in for Gran. I felt like I belonged. Jonah cleared his throat, shifting slightly in his chair. "So, Claire, I was thinking maybe we should have dinner sometime. Just us." My fingers paused mid-stitch, my pulse skipping at his words. Jonah, ever steady and dependable, rarely hesitated. But now there was a flicker of something uncertain in his eyes. A slow smile spread across my face. "I'd like that." He exhaled, grinning. "Good." Around us, the cafe was alive with laughter and warmth, a steady thread of connection woven through each of us. I glanced down at my hands, at the knitting needles moving with newfound confidence, and knew that I wasn't just holding on to something old. I was creating something new. And for the first time in a long while, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be.